So we accomplished our first two things. We talked about the importance of parks, trails, and open spaces. And a second thing, we reviewed the regional housing trends. Our third task gets right at what you were saying before, Tom, is who is, or alluding to before, who is in Waunakee, who is missing from our mix in Waunakee. And that's what we're going to spend the next. It's going to be a quick 30 minutes. So we're probably going to get the information out there. We'll talk about it a little bit. This is something maybe that we think about between now and our November meeting. In November, Dan Verhoff will be here from the UW Applied Population Laboratory, and he's going to go in depth on demographics. We're just going to focus today on incomes. When we're talking about who is missing, we're talking about one narrow slice of defining who demographically is in Waunakee and who is missing from Waunakee. There are a lot of other ways that we can talk about that, and we will talk about race, education, job type, and whatnot. Today we're starting with that income piece though. Statistics refresher, if you had a chance to look over your work pack. Median and mean, and Steve mentioned this before. Median, the middle value, 50% of the numbers are above, 50% below. Mean or average, which is what most of us are used to saying, is the average of all of the numbers. The statistics joke, if there's such a thing as a statistics joke, is that when Bill Gates walks in the room, everybody becomes a millionaire. Right? It doesn't matter what we're making. If we take 5 randomly selected people and they make $25,000, $25,000, $50,000, $75,000, and Bill Gates, the average income in the room is $10 million. Wouldn't it be great if he walked in a room and then he didn't have to write us a check so that became true? That would be fantastic. So we talk about, in this slide presentation at least, we'll talk about median income because that's a pretty good measure. So this is what people exactly in the middle of the mix make in Waunakee. So the first thing, and we said this, defining affordable housing is tricky. So Steve alluded to this. One approach is we can consider the following question. Not how much does the house cost, absolutely, but for whom is Waunakee currently affordable? Who can afford to live here right now? And then based on the answer to number 1, who's missing in our community? So it's one way to approach it. We can approach it other ways, and we can do that in future sessions, but today this is the way we'll look at it. So Kurt Paulson, who is at UW-Madison, he also sits on the housing board in Middleton, so he does a little bit of this sort of work in Middleton, is defined what he called moderate income households. And he said a moderate income household is an household that the income is too high to qualify for low income housing programs, but too low to take full advantage of tax deductions. And in his calculations, he said this kind of hovers around 80 to 120% of median incomes for most communities. He calls this the missing middle. So when we look at Waunakee, our missing middle, our median income in Waunakee, and the numbers I pulled are a little bit different from yours. For all households, it was $93,000 in the version of the American Community Survey that I was looking at. In Dane County, it was $65,000. So we see a difference in median income there. And then when we look at what does that mean for our 120% to 80%, so $75,000 to $112,000 is what we might call the middle in Waunakee. And when we look at that in Dane County, it goes from $52,000 to $77,000. Those might be what we consider that middle 40% as kind of the middle class incomes in these communities. And below that, we would say in Dane County, maybe below $51,000 per household is working class communities. Above at 77 might be upper middle class communities. So what do you guys notice about that number?
Waunakee's higher.
Waunakee's higher? Quite a bit higher?
Waunakee's low is almost Dane County's high.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's like a tiny bit, there's like a $3,000 overlap here, and that's it. Yeah. So when we kind of characterize that among Dane County, if we think of ourselves not just as Waunakee as a community, among all Dane County residents, what would we classify the residents of Waunakee as?
Wealthy.
Wealthier? Upper middle class? By this chart, not everybody's in these income brackets, right?
Right.
You know? This is our 80% to 120%. So the majority of Waunakee residents are still going to be not in those income brackets. Or 50% below.
When we're talking about median income and affordability, do we make any distinction between single people and two-income families?
We do. Yeah. So, yeah, we can look at kind of how your household is composed. Yeah, and what that does, it changes dramatically what's affordable and what you can't afford as a family. So when we look at all households, it's $93,000 for Waunakee. Families, and the census considers a family 2 or more related individuals living under the same household. So it could be a parent and a child, 2 married people, an adult child and an adult parent, and that married couple families, we go from 93,000 to 111,000 about for families. When we look at married couple families, so of all of these families, those that contain a married couple, a mom, dad, and children, possibly a multi-generational household, it could be mom, dad, and grandparents living there as well.
Does that mean married couple plus, or just could it be just the 2, like dual income, no kids?
It could be dual income, no kids.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the married, the difference is between, 2 household adults that are married to one another, filing a joint tax return or tax return individually, but still married. So 3,000 of those, now what does that tell you? Of all our families, 3,062 include married couples as opposed to 3,644 families. How do we differ from the rest of the nation that way? We have more married, we have a higher percentage of married families here in Waunakee than we would see nationwide.
And those families with not necessarily no children, okay? Families can be like a single mom and then keep
And
kids.
children.
Versus mom, dad, but not necessarily kids. Married mom, dad, but not necessarily.
But not necessarily. And that, if we have a married couple family, our median income goes up to about 124,000. And then we look at our non-family household. So that could be a single person, that could be 2 people living together as roommates. Their average income, their median income is 42,000
Combined
Who are those people?
for that household.
for the house.
Yeah.
Who are those people? What?
Could be single. It could also be, since we're talking about income, it could be retired folks who don't have an income to declare. So the
Young
Social
people
Security.
just getting into the job market.
Yeah.
Possibly sharing an apartment.
Yeah.
People who are widowed or widowers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, if you
Living on their own.
Income, which doesn't come necessarily investment.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have the taxable income. So what is that? What does that say? What do you guys get from that? Any information?
So the math person is telling me that our families, married couple families, are $28 to $35 an hour per person that they're making. And our non-families as a single are making $20 an hour.
There's one piece that sways that, and that's the number of people over 66 that you have, because they're going to have income that may not be the same type of reportable. They may have investments, getting investment income and so forth. So seniors do skew this kind of data.
They do. They do. Yeah.
So
So this
it's
could-
dramatic, but it's not. It's still going to be dramatic, but not as dramatic as we.
Did you say skew up or down?
It'll
Because it could be both.
If you took what they got to spend, it would cause it to be higher, so it makes it look lower
It's
than it is for seniors. I believe.
Not just seniors, but seniors could be in a married couple, you know, and be retired and have a good retirement income.
Right.
These two, this one in particular, I find very interesting as a group. I want to know more about that particular group. In November, we'll get to know more about that particular group when Dan's here, because he's going to have some more detailed granular information on that. But it seems to be a pretty dramatic difference here when we consider the slide before where we looked at what Dane County's median income is. There's a pretty big difference there. All right, So here we get to our discussion. So based on, and I'll go back to the previous slides, but this is our question, our first discussion question. Sharon is going to be our scribe. We're going to have a group discussion today instead of discussions at tables. So based on this income distribution as outlined in the previous slides, and we can go back to Steve's slides as well if you'd like, which groups income-wise are we missing from Waunakee?
Those that make minimum wage.
Minimum wage? Does it help to see this slide, or do you want the slide before with the Dane County, which is most helpful? Dane County? Here we go. So minimum wage.
What is the question again?
The question is, based on these slides, which income groups, who do we think are missing from Waunakee?
Who's at the minimum wage, people earning the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Retirees who are getting limited benefits.
Retirees with limited benefits.
Kids just getting out of high school, and if they're not going on to college, getting a job. A lot of them live at home for a while and then get enough to move out.
Young single emancipated people.
Yeah.
One of the questions, so are they living at home because they choose to, or are they living at home because they have to?
Who chooses?
People don't want to pay all their bills, probably. It's a mutual choice between the parents, within the family, it's a mutual choice to stay, as opposed to, I can't afford to move out because of my wages.
Yeah.
I want a clarification on this. I don't know who said it. Is it college graduates or high school graduates, or who's this referring to?
High school graduates just getting out, they're not going to school, and they're looking for a job, and they're probably staying home with mom and dad, come to think of it, for a while.
Who are these though? Who are these people?
I think those are people who are young, who are up and out, but are single.
Emancipated meaning not 21 yet.
Yeah, that they're out of their parents' house, but they're having trouble affording to live here.
Oh, it's 18 now.
Yes.
Young professionals and laborers.
Young professionals and laborers.
And I would just add to that, East Wash is a great example. I mean, that's who's living there, and may not just be housing directed. They want to be next to the field where the soccer team plays. They may want to be next to the bars downtown. So it's beyond the housing and what Waunakee offers that group. So it's because it's what I think is missing here also, but it's probably driven by more than just housing.
So if I said those looking for particular amenities?
Amenities,
Urban
sure.
amenities? Okay.
I was just going to say, it seems like the middle class bracket is skewed down. So not that they're missing, there's probably a percent of middle class people living here, but it's very small, I would say. Like a middle class family can't really afford to live here or potentially
What
buy
would
a
we define
home.
as middle class?
I would
We
have
can
to,
look at the chart, like based on this chart. who would we
based
say
on this chart, under 75,000.
Under
I mean,
75,000.
in America, isn't it like 40 grand or 45 or something in the United States?
Moderate income is considered up to about 70-ish, 75. It varies by inflation per year. I don't adjust it, but just thinking from since I work in banking purely, I mean, we call it low moderate income families, and that's literally from 10,000 or less all the way up to around 70,000.
Tom? Yeah.
I'm having a little trouble getting my arms around this, because if we're just looking at who we're missing from those numbers, I don't know how we can make the next assumption that any of these people fit in there. You've got, because you have non-family households, 50,000 of them. The median is 42,000. Well, they got to be in a house. They're right.
Or an apartment.
When they're here,
Right.
or else they would be counted here. So, and that's somebody that's making, what, 20 bucks an hour? About 20 bucks an hour, I'm guessing. But that's a median.
Yeah, that's usually.
So we're looking at these and saying who's missing, yet maybe minimum wage earners, because we're looking at $20 an hour and I don't even know what minimum wage is anymore. It's 7.75 or here in Madison it's 15, I don't even know. But if it's that low, then yeah, those people probably aren't gonna sit here. That one I get. Retirees with limited benefits, I don't see how we can figure that out from this. Young single emancipated people, well, they may be making $25 an hour, well, they did. Young professionals, I got young professionals that are in my family and they're in here, but they're not here. But that's other reasons, that's student debt and everything else. So, okay, so maybe somebody's got that answer for me that I don't know. It seems like we're jumping somewhere here by assuming we're putting labels on people and saying they fit here, but don't know. If we're just looking at numbers.
May I make a comment pertaining to that? There are many people who moved here many, many years ago. They have properties that they're paid for. They don't have a house payment, so they have taxes and they have insurance and maintenance. So they don't have, at this point, they aren't paying as much out as what it would cost to be paying a mortgage payment. Many of these people aren't making large sums of money compared to what workers are now. That's one big hole that's going on right now in Waunakee.
My mom's one of those.
Yes.
I'm one of those.
Yes, and I'm one of those.
And soon to be
Yes. So, and so for many of those people, right now, they're doing okay, but as time goes on, and inflation gets higher and higher, what they're going to have to work with is going to be less and less.
Right. So is one of the questions maybe that we need to have more information on then is who beyond income, how can we characterize based on data that is here? I think we maybe have been talking about needing some more information about this group here. And then this group that is in this 50%, the lower, the 60%, the 60% bracket.
And how many of those people actually have more than one job that are falling in there? Because my son now has picked up a second job, and he would probably fall now in the $40,000 range, whereas if he was only working his one job, lowered to the $30,000 range. So how many people are actually making more, working two jobs to be able to afford to live here? We're missing that data also.
So two pieces of data we need. What income bracket do we want to collect this data on? And what would we say if we were going to go out and do a survey or collect some data or dig in deeper with census data? Upper bracket of income people we want to know about is, we don't need to know about the people that are making $112,000 a year maybe, right? So what would be kind of the top end if we're looking at needing to know more about people who make from here to here? What would that be based on this?
I think top would probably be around the 75,000.
Okay, so we need more information on people who make $75,000 or less in Waunakee. What's the information we need to know from them? How long have you been here? Right. Did you own your house? When did you buy your house?
Do you work here?
Do you work here?
How many jobs are you working?
How many jobs are you working?
Do you have a roommate?
Do you have a roommate?
Do you live with family?
Do you live with family?
Do you have children?
Do you have children? We'll slow down for a second. Sharon is good.
I've forgotten.
All right, what do we all say?
Let's see, how many jobs?
How many jobs? Do you live with family?
Or roommates.
Or roommates? And I brought a really small bag today.
There was one more right in here, so.
Where do you work?
Yeah.
Do you rent or own?
Do you rent or own?
If she has that, she has that.
You have that on there. If you rent, do you want to own?
Education.
Education. Gender.
Absolutely.
Occupation.
Number of children.
And I suppose married, married or single, right?
What other kinds of income do you have besides a job?
Yeah. Mom and dad help pay your rent. Are you retired and you have a pension?
Do you have debt?
Disability? Are you on disability? Do you have
Debt.
Do you have debt?
Is healthcare paid for through your job?
Yeah.
So I don't want to be a downer here, but I feel like a lot of people are going to get a question list like this and say, no way, I'm not telling you this information. I mean, some of this stuff is really personal to people. So the cost of it could maybe be, I know that we're just throwing out ideas, but like if we were to put together some sort of survey, maybe consider the fact that you're asking for a lot of privacy related things on there. I mean, most people probably don't want to talk about their debt because, I mean, it's pretty well known in America that a lot of people don't have enough money to make an emergency payment the next month if something bad happens. I don't think they're going to want to disclose that, especially if if they consider themselves in a certain income level and maybe they're not aware of where they're at. I'm just saying.
Well, is it anonymous
It's
versus?
anonymous, and they know it's for a good reason.
Because I know a lot of people in my generation would answer.
But
because-
even with anonymity, some people will look at certain questions and say, yeah, I don't know if this is really something I want to share. Even, I mean, the most anonymous thing, some people are going to still come up with conspiracy theories like, oh, I'm collecting this information for some reason. Even if we say it's for housing, I don't disagree, it is a good thing. But I think we live in an era now where the more information you ask from somebody, they might be a little more reticent and say, yeah, it's not really.
Yeah, they'll put anything
And
on
that's
social
not-
media.
Well,
I'll say that's not-
I'm not saying that people are equal with how they share the information.
Yeah, I'll say that's not uncommon, and typically when we do the surveys, we'll have, the surveys that we distribute for this will be online for the most part, and then in paper for people who don't have access to a computer, don't feel comfortable with that. You can skip questions if you don't want to answer that, we let them know that. We have, income is a pretty good gauge, I ask that on a lot of the surveys that I do, and depending on the community, we will range between about 5 to 15% of people that'll skip that particular question, but they'll answer some other questions that are surprisingly personal. Yeah, so we might get, do you live with a roommate, do you have somebody else help you with your rent, but they might not share, do they have debt? But we'll have other information that we can, that'll be useful. But
I'm gonna
good
just
point,
make
good
a
point.
note so that there's, like, when asking people information, to be aware of some of those limitations, to have some caution. So I'll just put a note on the list there.
And time.
And isn't some of this information available somewhere? It might be 2010 census information, but some of this information is going to be somewhere in the school district.
So,
I mean, somewhere, I would think that you could get at some of this without having to start over.
we will, yeah. And some of it, Dan Fairhoff will bring some of it next month when he comes to speak with us. Some of this stuff, like is mom and dad helping you with rent, is not a census question, is it? Yeah. So if you get assistance that's not public assistance or some other assistance. So there may be a few questions on there that we can't answer, but with public information.
I guess the one thing that I was thinking of as your initial question was what's missing after we started.
Yeah.
And the part that I agree with Tom, because what I see across our community, there's nothing missing. It's just disproportionate, not distributed. So that's probably a question that has to be addressed at some point, is what do you want the picture of the pie to look like as far as the distribution for opportunities to people across the income spectrum.
It might be
Right
good
now,
to see
they're
these
all there.
numbers, right? What you're saying, it might be good to see the numbers. You know,
Right.
how do you come to $42,000? Is there like just 10 people and that's
Right.
the median of 10 people? I know it says that there's 1,000, but it'd be nice to know where they kind of sit.
So see the actual
See what the
distribution.
range is.
We can do that. Yeah, that's very easy to do. Yeah.
I wanted to ask Randy, If you can tell us what the number is for free and reduced lunch prices.
Free and reduced lunch is, so when I started a decade ago, it was about 5-6%, and right now we're about 12.
Okay.
State average is 45% plus. So
it's gone up, but
it's gone, we've doubled, but so has the state's doubled. The state's running about 45% free and reduced lunch, we're at about 12.
What do you have to do to qualify for that?
There's a federal formula, so.
percentage of poverty rated.
Yeah, it's federal
Size of
formula.
family.
Right.
Are kids automatically signed up for that, or do they have to sign up for that?
No, they have to actively sign up for that. So you do have, that's probably a little bit low because there's always some families that don't, particularly as you move towards the high school. But that would be similar across the state. That's not unique to here.
I'm confused about the notion of just looking at money. I mean, I have a really hard time with that.
Yeah.
So, are we looking for people who have income of $40,000 a year for a small family, but they have a car? Or, I mean, there's so many other factors, and there's factors that would attract someone here. It could be schools, it could be, it could be a lot of things. So this is just a hard way for me to think about housing. It's just about money. And people do make decisions about things like schools that has an impact on affordability for them too.
So I'm right with you right now on this, and I'm going to maybe ask Steve this question. Do people go to places and say, I want a house in that community?
Yeah, that's what they do.
Amazing, it's amazing how many people don't move anymore. It used to be that people were pretty mobile, they would move around a lot, but they're
But
not.
is it the actual house that draws them to the community?
No. I bought our first house in Waunakee, Chris. I'm moving to Waunakee.
It's all the other factors
They pick a region.
that we're not discussing yet. This is just one component, and I think this is one component. I think we're going to look overall at, why do people come here? Why do they want to be here? What makes Waunakee such a place that people want to go, just like the coasts? Everybody goes and pays huge dollars to be there. Why is Waunakee a little bit higher than everybody else? Why are they wanting to come here? One, obviously, we already know is our schools being rated as high as they are. Other things are probably going to come out our location to everything around us.
It is not, like when I moved from Maine here, I didn't want a new house. I wanted an older house because that's what I grew up in. But I didn't come in saying I wanted a Victorian, find me a Victorian house, I don't care where it is. It was, we made, it was like a three-step process. We wanted to live in Madison, okay? We didn't want to commute into Madison, we wanted to be in Madison. Then we looked at what about east side versus west side? Well, we want to be on the west side. Okay, now what neighborhood? Well, now it comes down to housing. Okay, and then, so it's narrowing down. The actual final house is like fourth on the list.
So this isn't the whole state. We're going to eat the state one bite at a time, and tonight's bite is kind of defining. This is our last questions that we'll be able to address tonight. We've got about 4 minutes left. I'm happy to hold everybody late, but I don't think you guys want that. So just looking at when we're going to go out and we're going to examine this and take this apart, and we're going to ask all of these questions about why are you here, why else did you come here. When we define moderate income in Waunakee and Dane County, based on these slides, what would we say is moderate and what would we say is lower income? Very first swipe at this is just looking at which incomes are we targeting to ask the questions from. Because if we want to talk about affordable housing, it helps us to know who's already living here in those income brackets and why did they come here and when did they come here and what was it that attracted them. Because we know for some folks in those income brackets, being here is probably a sacrifice. It's probably costing them more than that 30% of their income to be here. Others may have been here a long time and might be there just paying taxes. Yeah. So based on this, where would we say moderate income in Waunakee is and in Dane County? Can we go back to the other slide? Huh?
Did you do that?
I defined it, but it's your
Well,
definition.
Kurt Paulson defined it.
Yeah, Kurt Paulson defined it for us. So, do you agree with that definition? Do you want to define it differently? We don't have to adopt that definition.
Well, the problem with this is too, is it depends on how many children and how big the household is.
Yeah.
You know, for a family with 4 kids and a mom and a dad and 2 cars and all that, you know, a moderate income of $50,000 would be really stretching it.
Yeah.
So I think they got 2 things going there. But overall, I think there's between 30 and 70 for moderate, or maybe 35 and 70 and under 35 would be low income. And I think, if I remember correctly, the definition of poverty, or for a lot of these programs, is certain percent, like 125% above poverty, or 130% above poverty. And so that would, you know, put people in the 30 to 40, still as eligible for housing.
So 35 to 70 for moderate income, below 35 for low income? What do y'all?
I'd go with 40.
40, yeah, 40,
Yeah.
below 40 for low income.
It's $44,999 or less is low.
Other thoughts?
Is that also be middle class?
Is
No,
this
middle class,
gross
sort of
income,
thing.
adjusted gross income?
Gross income.
Okay.
What do you think? You feel that's low?
Yeah, it's hard to survive on 40,000. That's really low this day and age when you think of everything you do. If you have any kids or
It's low in
even elsewhere. Yeah.
But I mean, at that level, you start qualifying for, if you wanted certain public assistance programs, even for housing, like, and I know that they're not talking about that, but I mean, like, there's things like USDA and things like that in more rural areas start chipping in at that point.
Utilities.
Other thoughts?
I think 40,000, I'm with you, 40,000 as family income is not moderate, that's low.
Okay.
All right.
If you live in Waunakee, to Chris's point, if you live in Waunakee, you have to have a car. There's no buses coming here to take you to your job in downtown Madison.
That would change the whole complexion of this village if we had public transportation.
Yes.
Public transit makes a big difference for any of the employees we have in Madison.
Yeah.
Has there been any talk of Madison expanding its bus service?
They want to go into Sun Prairie, but they've got to get a barn so that they can store additional equipment, and there's no money for place or anything for that. They applied for a grant, didn't get it.
Would the city get involved in
The
Madison?
answer is yes. There is,
Yes.
yes. Metro has a plan, and the MTO has a plan that they would expand. First, it'd be express bus service out here during certain times, but they've got to be able to get ridership and
Subsidy.
the subsidy.
The city of Waunakee is like, yeah, we like that idea. There's the city of Waunakee going, yeah.
We haven't taken it. There hasn't been a position. Yeah.
What's the feel in the room? Good idea, bad idea?
Good aspects, bad aspects.
What's it cost?
It sounds like an economist answer.
Driving down the campus every day, paying the answer because I wanted to.
What's the question?
All right, so it is, yes, Tom.
That's too low.
That's too low? Is anybody, are 50,
No,
bottom 50?
I don't think.
And that's what it would be out here.
I think 40's right.
You think 40's right?
Yeah.
I think it
My
depends.
husband's a retired bus
People in the household,
Yeah.
okay.
Poverty level change in the
So our chart,
A single person could get out of this. Yeah, for kids, you definitely could get out of 40.
yeah.
Right.
So I will send out a distribution of incomes that'll make this a little bit more clear before our next one. But it's frustrating, is it not? It's difficult, right? Like we could set this bar anywhere, and where we set the bar and what we come up with for how we're defining moderate and low is going to affect what we decide to recommend, what you decide to recommend. I'm not recommending anything. So this is something over the course of the next month, as you're going through your day-to-day life, think about it. And when Dan gets here next month, we're gonna have a lot more data that we're gonna turn over and we're gonna sift. And hopefully we're gonna get closer to nailing down how this task force defines these numbers. No easy answer, no right answer, probably some wrong answers. You know, and answers that are right, but maybe more right than others. But this is gonna be one of the central tasks for us this fall.
So when we're looking at this, do we want to look at how to get people into town to work at those $11 an hour jobs also?
It's up to
Is
you.
that part of the whole scenario?
Are we looking for people or housing? You know, are we looking for, to how do we get people in to fill the housing or whatever, or how do we get the housing to meet the needs of the people that are already here?
Isn't it kind of go together? I mean, you have to have jobs for people to be here, and then you have to have housing for the people to want to work here to fill those jobs.
Right.
Well, why do people have to work in the same city they live in?
They don't. But
I don't
if
think
they
that's
don't have the,
required.
if they don't have the income to live here, then they aren't going to work here.
And these are all great questions. Matt Curis is going to come to speak with us in December about commuting patterns. These are the part of the first few meetings we're going to have is realizing the depth and the breadth of the task ahead of us and defining who and what are we really talking about.
I'll
So,
be
be
the
patient.
voice of small business here. If you
Yes.
drive through the industrial park, you drive anywhere in town, you're going to see help wanted signs. People, we need people to live here, to work here, because everybody's competing, and if you can work 5 miles or 3 miles from your home, you're going to choose that rather than driving from Madison through the traffic that we have to come up here to work.
What do you think the average income for people in the industrial park would be compared to because I've driven up and down Main Street, and those are the jobs I've seen, the help wanted jobs I've seen. What's the
Well, the
income?
machinist said some of those prices are in that $20 an hour.
Yeah, so we are at 7:35 right now. I owe you 5 minutes next month. If you want to stay and talk, you're welcome. Oh wait, Chris has got something, I'm sorry.
You have to make, somebody has to make a motion to adjourn. Motion by Susan. Tiffany got it before you talk. Good. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. Oh, and
Thank you for the candy, Chris.